I think for the last 4 or 5 decades, we've been doing things the same way. And I think we are on the verge of a shift. You know, young people don't want to be patient flow specialists. Young people don't necessarily want to choose the job of being a nurse because it's a very hard job. The Olive Branch, dates back to Roman and Greek, empire, where giving someone or extending the olive branch is an extension of peace and friendship and harmony and love. This is the All of You podcast, episode 1. Let's get into it. So, if you are listening to this, you somehow have maybe been informed of Olive Branch Mentorship Incorporated. And this is a not-for-profit that was officially registered with the government of Ontario. We are an incorporated not-for-profit organization. And that is something that was only just established April 26th of 2024. So I don't know when you will be listening to this, but April 26th, 2024 was when Olive Branch Mentorship was actually birthed into the not-for-profit world. And originally, the concept of Olive Branch Incorporated was not a not-for-profit. In the spring of 2023, I had identified that I was having the same conversations over and over and over again in the classrooms with the college students that I teach. And one of the resounding sort of messages that was coming through in my conversations was that young people were really struggling to get employed. And at the time, I would say, let's say like February, March of 2023, my conversations were focused more so around cover letters and resume development. And unbeknownst to me, going into this idea that I was going to help people edit their resumes and cover letters so that they would land job interviews. And so I went into this really sort of wide-eyed and enthusiastic, and I was met, very early on in the process with the reality that there's so much free information on the internet and on social media, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. Holy, there's just so much advice and guidance and direction that's already free and available for people online. And so then, of course, introduce ChatGPT to the conversation, and that completely sort of changed things. I guess maybe not in 2023 so much when I was kind of having these revelations, but once I was kind of getting into it and I realized that there was already so much resume and cover letter support available online, and some of it was helpful and some of it was just clickbait. I don't know, I guess there was a part of me that just felt like this wasn't the right thing, and I was thinking it, but everyone around me was like, no, this is amazing, and keep going, and we love Olive Branch. And it wasn't that I thought the entire concept of Olive Branch was kind of bust, but I guess I just had a really hard time wrapping my head around charging people for something as like a for-profit thing. Because first of all, if you're seeking resume and cover letter support, you're probably unemployed, or you're probably in a job that you're not happy with, maybe not making enough money. And also students, I just couldn't, there was no amount of money that I felt comfortable charging people. And, as a professional and having to pay bills and utilities and, dog food, I had to, make a very realistic judgment call and say, it's not a good use of my time to be giving away services for free because I still need to work. And the amount of people who need help, clearly in the volume of emails that I was receiving and messages and DMs and all kinds of things, I started to feel really overwhelmed with the stories that I was hearing and how desperate people were and how guilty I would feel when messages, I would maybe read them or not read them, and then they would go unresponded to. And I struggled with the fact that every single message that I didn't respond to was somebody who needed help. And that didn't sit well with me. And it actually really kind of made me, I don't know, it made me very fearful of the business as a for-profit thing. It very much made me worried that people would maybe think that I was in this for my own personal financial gain or something. And it was never really about how can I become a millionaire editing resumes and cover letters. Like, that was never the vision. And so let's just say that brought me to about May, June, and 2023, we had a social event where I invited, 20 some odd people to come to my home. I can't remember how many people ended up coming, but it was maybe like 18 or so people ended up coming. And we had some really incredible, very forthcoming, I just felt like I was really trying to break down the walls of wanting people to feel comfortable speaking to me about the experiences that they were going through. And, it just so happened that the young people that I have direct access to are the college students that I teach, and the college students that I teach happen to also be international students. So not only are they struggling with being young and inexperienced, they've also now relocated themselves to an entirely new country, and if they know people here, it's a very, very, small community. And so a lot of the messaging that was coming through in that first session was specifically, just how much sacrifice, many of them, how much sacrifice they had to go through in order to get to where they were, and how it was almost as though they were kind of being fed a false bill of promise, and that based like what they were being told their experience in Canada would be like once they got here, that was not the experience that they were, on the receiving end of. And, there was one particular student in that session who was extremely forthcoming about feeling as though he actually made a big mistake coming here. And that was like a gut punch to me, because he's a doctor, and it's like, we need doctors. And I struggled because every single person who sat, in my living room just shared vulnerable experiences. And I knew then that there was a problem more than resume and cover letter development. Okay, it was integrating yourself into a community and finding your community, and how when maybe there is confidence or language barrier or just lack of opportunity based off of where you've relocated yourself, because there are several academic institutions, where you're competing with thousands and thousands and thousands of other people. I just started to sort of realize in that moment that the problem was so much bigger than basic job search strategy, which was, the original brainstorming. Like, I had an easel in the middle of my living room, and the original brainstorming concepts were all about job search strategy. Anyways, so this brings us into the summer of 2023, and I was not well. I was actually quite ill. I had multiple surgeries in 2023. My mental health was in the toilet. I was in the first loving, successful, beautiful adult relationship I'd ever been in my life, and grappling with that, and simultaneously wrapping my head around the fact that I was going to be losing my stepmom, because she had a very long, very tragic battle with cancer. And I knew that was coming. So there was a lot of things kind of contributing to my decision to put OBM on the back burner, for my own health, both physical and mental, but also after I had that social event, Yash and I, maintained contact, and he was actually very honest with me in saying, it's not resume and cover letter development. He's like, you're on to something, but it's not resume and cover letter development. And the fact that he was so honest with me was really helpful, because when everyone around you loves you and they want to, they believe in you, and those things, like, they don't want to hurt your feelings. And as much as I love my people, like, I would prefer to not waste, years of my life, if it's not, or months even, or days even. Like, I don't want to waste my time on anything that, isn't going to actually be value add or helping people, and it's not the right thing. I don't want to find that out after I've, invested time and money and emotion and everything into it. So I put it on hold, and a lot of things happened over the next several months. The latter half of 2023 was an extremely difficult time for me. And I'm going to get into this eventually, but not in this episode. This is the birth of OBM. I've been referring to OBM as my brainchild. And so essentially, I go through hell and back again, and the end of December, I am teaching a class on issues in health leadership. And I have a really, tragic, traumatic event happen to me on December 18th of 2023. But I just had to, keep my shit together. I had to keep my shit together because I had to make it through to the end of the semester. And then I knew I had Christmas break. So I had Friday classes in that semester. And it just so happened that the very last presentation on the very last day of the semester, after this very horrific thing where I'm barely hanging on by a thread, this student in my class, Issues in Health Leadership, she delivered a presentation on the difference in leadership between Gen Z and Millennial. And she was very articulate, and she had a vibe, and she poked fun kind of about like professor does, and da-da-da. And it was very funny. We had kind of banter back and forth. But I appreciated all of the data and all of the hard evidence that she actually was able to present in her presentation. And I don't know, I walked away from that class feeling kind of inspired. Like, I was listening to her talk, and I'm like, she's onto something. Like, young people are different, and Gen Z have a completely different way of looking at the world, a completely different way of looking at mental health and quality of life and work-life balance. And so I can't say that I honestly dove headfirst into exploring that right away, because I had some stuff to deal with, and my mental health just was still in the pits. So Christmas comes and goes. My partner and I, he hates when I call him my partner, and he's sitting right there, so I'm going to say partner, the love of my life. We went on a vacation, a much needed vacation. And when I came back, I just tried to get back into the swing of things and start a new semester. I always find that like beginning of a new semester is really kind of cleansing for me. I love change. I love adapting. Like, I cannot do the same thing over and over again, or as soon as it loses its dopamine fix. Sorry, I'm talking with my hands if you can hear the smacking, but like the dopamine fix of a new semester for me is like everything. And I needed that. So going into winter semester 2024, okay, we're coming on like a year since OBM, first began even being spoken into an existence. I had a student approach me in like the second or third week of the class, and he approached me and asked me how Olive was. And if you don't know, my dog's name is Olive. And Olive Branch Mentorship, I'm going to get into this origin in a minute, but I had never mentioned it. I hadn't say anything about Olive or anything. And I was like, she's good. And he was like, and what about Olive Branch Mentorship? And I was like, how do you know about that? And he actually was like, I started following you back in India, and I was really looking forward to having you as an instructor because I was really kind of excited about the things that you were talking about. Like, and then all of a sudden you went radio silence on Instagram, and I just didn't know whatever happened to it. And didn't that like hit me like a ton of bricks, I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Like, people in India were actually paying attention to what was happening last spring and actually like looking forward to coming to Canada to have, like-minded conversations. And I don't know, it was beautiful. And he said, like, you got to start that back up again. I'll get every single person in this class to follow you, or whatever he said. And they were really great. That group was awesome. And so that moment was very kind of eye-opening to me. And then I kind of got started thinking about the presentation that took place with that brilliant young girl. And I don't know if this is against the rules, but I looked her up and I found her Gmail email address. I was working nights like some creep, emailing her at like 3:00 in the morning, just telling her all about my idea for OBM and how I felt like it needed to be an intergenerational approach, and that her presentation is something that I've continued to come back to. And I really wanted to sit down and talk to her a little bit more about her experiences. And yeah, I just wanted to pick her brilliant mind. And so enter Shambhavi, Sham, to the chat. And then I reconnected with Yash, although he was always kind of checking in every couple months, like, you good? You still alive? And so introduced Yash and connected Yash and Sham. And by that time, it was like early, mid-March. And then conversations with lawyers and conversations with banks to establish a business account for the not-for-profit, reaching out to my best friends who are brilliant and talented, and people that I have kind of met in my own career along the way that I just couldn't, imagine not tapping into them because they are just so incredible, and we've always maintained some kind of a connection. So it just made sense that I would reach out to certain people, and lo and behold, some certain people were really enthusiastic about hopping on board. And yeah, we got our articles of incorporation. We attended an incredible conference, the Social Next conference. And one thing that I was saying to Sham and some of the other people that I was having conversations with initially, Himanshu, I was having lots of conversations with people about skill development and networking. And the reality was I'd been to all the healthcare conferences. Like, I know what the healthcare conference vibe is like, but I don't know anything about social media. I don't know anything about podcasting. I don't know anything about AI. And so I felt like it was a way better use of my time to be attending events and conferences and summits and whatevers, so that I could rub elbows with people that I wouldn't normally have the opportunity to connect with. That just made sense to me because I already have a vast network of healthcare executives and professionals and clinicians and nurses and, all of those people, which is incredible. And I love that I have a 24-year career in healthcare. But what I was inspired by even more than that was the opportunity to dip my toe in a world that I know nothing about. But what I did know, just based off of conversation, is that the way to reach young people is to get in their face on their phone. And did I know for even 1 millisecond, how difficult it is to create content or to have a podcast? Like, something you need to know about me is, like, if I want to do something, like, nothing is impossible. And it is, it's possible. We're doing it. But I would be lying to you if I said that I haven't nearly lost my mind 49 trillion times, and bless a million times over the people in my life who are supporting me in this, the people who believe in me. Like, thank you. Thank you. Because I know. Sorry. I know sometimes I am intolerable. I know sometimes I'm chaotic. I can be very blunt. And I'm like zero filter about the way that I'm feeling about things. Like, if I'm feeling a certain way about something, it's very hard for me to mask that. I was diagnosed neurodivergent at 35, medicated, psychologists, thousands of hours of counseling and therapy. Like, I have an interesting personality, and I have very unusual idiosyncrasies. And so the people who are working with me, the patience and the grace that they have extended, I can't thank you enough. And I hope that you stick with me and that we see where this beautiful thing goes, because, sometimes it does. I don't know if you know the movie A Beautiful Mind, but like, when I think about was it Russell Crowe who was in Beautiful Mind? When I think about those scenes from that movie and how his brain works, like, there are times when I'm fantasizing and dreaming about what OBM could become. I feel like it's a beautiful mind moment. And there have been so many times in the last 6 months. Yeah, literally 6 months. We've only been doing this for 6 months. Feels like a lifetime, but there have been a few times in the last 6 months where people are like, you have to stop coming up with ideas. Like, you have to stop coming up with ideas. They're all good ideas, but it's like, how many things can you actually be doing at once? And the crazy thing about what OBM has become for me is that I feel like I'm able to use every ounce of creative energy that I've had in me my entire life. But a lot of that creativity, I think, has been stifled by my career in healthcare because of how regimented everything is and how chained to policy you are. And the budget is a problem with OBM too, but I don't know. I just think that there were opportunities in my career in healthcare to be creative and think outside of the box in a small way, but nothing like this. Nothing like this. Like building your brainchild and then working with people who believe in your brainchild and who, despite all of your flaws and everything that makes you weird and intolerable, they see something in your idea and they want to be a part of it. And it's not every day that you get to be a part of building something from nothing, but something that is so desperately needed. And I mean, what is that something? I want to believe that what OBM is becoming is a community. It's a community of like-minded young professionals who all identify that the workforce is broken, many aspects of the workforce is broken, and these are passionate, educated, articulate, capable, brilliant people who simply need a platform and a fan base and a team supporting them, so that they have something to believe in. And I think we live in a world right now where it can be really hard to want to believe in anything because there's so much happening. You know, there's political unrest and, you know, the the environment is collapsing and the economy is also bust and our education system is struggling and our don't even get me started on the healthcare system, okay? You'll hear enough about my feelings in the healthcare system if you keep following along on this journey. But there are so many things happening in our world and in our society and even in our local communities where it can be hard to want to believe in something. And I want OBM to be the thing that people believe in. And I want to create connections, and I want to build opportunities, and I want to talk about things that people are not comfortable talking about in the professional landscape because of the red tape and the policies and, you know, the restrictions, like the HR textbooks that are, you know, I don't know. None of this is scripted, by the way. I'm not reading from a teleprompter. Like, this is all from my heart. This is all me. And I am going to keep being me, and I'm going to keep talking about these things the way that I am so that I can empower other young professionals to do the same. Because I think if we keep just going with the flow and sticking, you know, with what's the narrative that's being fed to us, and if we are afraid to challenge the status quo and we're afraid to push the envelope in the conversations that we're having, we're just going to remain in this infinite loop of, I say this all the time, it's like my favorite thing. Einstein says that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think for the last 4 or 5 decades, we've been doing things the same way. And I think we are on the verge of a shift because the younger generation that's emerging in this wackadoodle post-pandemic world that we're in, I think young people want change. And I don't think people even know the first way to create change. And I am certainly not going to sit here with you on my trusty, dusty podcast bar and tell you that I know the answer for how to create change, because I don't. But what I do know, just based off of my own experiences and things that I've been observing, is that small changes, small incremental change over time will lead to larger change and impact in the future. So if I am able to reach one person's headphones on public transit, or if I'm able to speak to you through your car phone speaker once a week for the next however long, talking to you about empowering stories and inspiring people, but also maybe inspire you a little bit with the story that I have and how I have been able to persevere and remain resilient. I don't particularly love the word resilient because I believe the definition says something like how quickly you are able to bounce back from adverse or traumatic events in your life. And it's like, what's the quick, like, if I have a traumatic event, like, how quickly am I supposed to recover from that? And does everybody recover as quickly depending on the traumatic event that you experience? So I've got beef with the definition of resilience. But yeah, I have a story of overcoming, and I am actually a product of the system. I was actually born into a not-for-profit, believe it or not, and there will be kind of more coming out about that over the next couple of months, but I was actually the product of a teenage pregnancy in the 80s. My biological mom got pregnant for the first time when she was 12 and gave birth to that baby 2 days after she turned 13. That baby was put up for adoption, a decision that was made by her mother. And okay, she was 13. Like, that makes sense. Was probably the right thing to do, right? And let's just add to the fact that she was also in a Mennonite, not Amish, but Mexican Mennonite community, and teen pregnancy. That looked highly upon. So when the first baby was put up for adoption, my mom was angry, and she took it upon herself to go, to any means necessary in order to have another baby. And wouldn't you know it, but 14 months later, I was born. And I later found out, having access to her diaries at one time in my life, that I was, conceived in the backyard garden shed. And that there was a number of potential suitors who happened to be my sperm donor on, that forsaken event. And so I was born. She was pregnant with me, obviously, given her family dynamics. And I will just say, like, her story is not my story to tell, but I do think this part of the story, kind of leading up to me being a part of the system, is important to tell. So I will never tell my biological mom's story for her. I will only tell the story how I remember it and how it was told to me. So she ran away when she started showing, I'm sure. And at the time, the options were not plentiful. And one way or another, she ended up coming into support somehow, where she came to find that there was this new home that was being established for unwed mothers. It was called the Rehoboth Home. And anyway, she was welcomed into this home as one of the very first young women who was displaced and needed a place to be safe and to be cared for and to help her take care of her baby. And that was me. And I always remember her telling me, just how special the Rehoboth home was. She actually had like a newspaper clipping that she kept in a Ziploc bag for as long as I could remember. And she just talked about how special the Rehoboth home was because she had nowhere else to go. And it was a not-for-profit, and it, charity. And I didn't, My mom only had custody of us sort of off and on over the years, up until I was about 10. So I didn't have really consistent parental guidance or mentorship or a support unit. And it was actually the people in the system who protected me the most. My teachers. One kind of beautiful thing about the fact that my mom was so young when she had me, she actually brought me to her grade 9 classroom. She didn't go past grade 9, but she brought me to her grade 9 classroom and, taught about, I think it was like the family services class or something like that. Everyone else was using bags of flour, and my mom had a baby in tow. And so the first few years of my life, when she was sober and I was the center of her universe, I was 2 years old, speaking the alphabet in English and French, and she talked to me like her bestie. So I had a very wide vocabulary at a very young age. I still have a very wide vocabulary, and it was identified really early on in kindergarten that I was advanced, and they wanted to push me from senior kindergarten to grade 2, just certain things like that. My mom didn't choose to actually put me into advanced because her young mind was thinking, like, I don't want her to be bullied or be made fun of if she's, younger in a different class. So anyways, I firmly believe that part of the reason why my brain developed the way that it did and my ability to communicate, was so strong, I firmly believe that that's because I had her influencing me during the most fundamental years of my brain development. And yes, there was trauma. Boy, was there ever. But when I was, about 9 months old, she met a man who ultimately I would have called my father for my entire life until the day that he died from ALS, or otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And he and my mom fell in love as teenagers, and I didn't know that he wasn't my dad. For a long time, I didn't know that he wasn't my biological dad, but he loved me like I was his biological daughter. And they had a child together. My mom got pregnant at 17, and they had my younger brother at 18. And I don't think it's necessary at this point for me to go too much further into that story. I do have every intention of telling that story, but the reason why I'm going into sort of the first few years of my life and my childhood is because I believe that if the Rehoboth home, if the not-for-profit hadn't have been there, and had my mom not been protected, and had I not been protected, I could have been an abortion. I could have been put up for adoption. And I'm a very firm believer that every single experience in our life, even gestationally, I believe that every single thing that happens to us in our life, it impacts us. It molds us. It's what makes us who we are. And so can I say that I'm grateful that I had those experiences and the trauma that ensued, once my mom became drug addicted, and once, mental health and psychosis kicked in and schizophrenia was on the table? I can't say that I'm grateful that I've had those experiences, but I can say that I'm very, very grateful for where I am today. And I'm very, very grateful that I had teachers and CAS workers and judges and food bank people and crossing guards and counselors, holy doodle, counselors. I am just so grateful that I had police officers, ambulance drivers. Like, these are all experiences with people in public and social services who saved me or rescued me, or you made decisions protecting me. And I was supported my entire life, like even into teenagers. So I was adopted legally. There's a reason why I'm emphasizing legally, but I was adopted legally, no matter what anybody says. I was legally adopted, and I was cared for in a different way than my biological mom was able to care for me. And I would go to the YMCA. I went to a YMCA program called Leaders in Training. And that's why our mentorship matching program is called the LIT Mentorship Matching Program, Leaders in Training, but also like it's lit, you get it. So Leaders in Training, YMCA. I started high school. I was on the drama committee. We, did wild, and we had oh my gosh, there was just so many things. I was prom queen. Like, I did really well in school. I probably could have done better, but I had raging ADHD that was undiagnosed. Anyways, I've always had a creative edge. I've always had an eclectic way of doing things. I've always been somebody who doesn't necessarily do the best falling in line. And I think that, ultimately it has contributed to a lot of the issues that I've had in my personal and professional life, and dynamics that have been created in my personal and professional life. But all I can say is today, in the fall of 2024, I believe that every single experience I've had in my life has brought me to where I am today, where I am launching a not-for-profit and I'm creating a community. And I'm now in a position where I feel like I can give back to public and social services, because it's not lost on me that choosing a career in helping people within our system the way that it's currently designed is not a glamorous job. And do I think young people, Gen Alpha and whatever the generation before Alpha is going to be called, do I think that we're going to see a lot of young people wanting to choose jobs in these industries? Hell if I know. But if I was young today and I just lived through a pandemic and I saw the way the healthcare system, virtually collapsed, and the stress that money and finances in the economy, but not only that, the inundation that we have with social media of content and the highlight reel of people's lives, young people don't want to be patient flow specialists. Young people don't necessarily want to choose the job of being a nurse because it's a very hard job. And I mean, what is leadership going to look like in 10 or 15 years? What is leadership in public and social services going to look like in 10 or 15 years? And in 6 short years from now, in 2030, when over 30% of our population is over the age of 65, and we are having a hard time getting people to become nurses and PSWs, who's going to take care of our old people? AI, like robots? Is the system that the government is currently designing with Ontario health teams gonna be the thing that fixes it? What are classrooms going to look like? How are we gonna be teaching people? How are people going to be learning? It's gonna be so different. And we have access to technology and information in a way that we've never had historically as a humanity. And it would be foolish of us to think that we can continue operating in the way our current system is with all of the technology and information that we have available to us, because the way the current system is working, at least from what I've observed, whatever my opinion matters, whatever my opinion is, what's it going to look like? Who made these decisions originally? And is that an accurate representation of the population that we are currently making decisions for the future? Not really. So, a lot of people ask sort of the origin of the olive branch thing, like where does the olive branch, if you're not familiar with Greek mythology, but the olive branch dates back to Roman and Greek empire, where giving someone or extending the olive branch is an extension of peace and friendship and harmony and love. And I've already mentioned this, but my dog's name is Olive. And the reason my dog's name is Olive is because the very first job I ever had as a teenager, yes, it was in public and social services. I actually had a job at 14 in a long-term care home. And one of the very first elderly women that I bonded with and had a incredible, friendship with at 14, her name was Olive. And she was actually the first person I ever experienced death with. And I always said that Olive name stuck with me, because when I came into work, that day, and I said, "Where's Olive?" And, they told me that she had passed. I was so sad because I couldn't remember what we had said to each other last. I didn't remember the exact words of our conversation. Like, I knew kind of what we had talked about, but I felt like my conversations with her were so routine that I didn't even stop and think for a moment at 14 that, this might be the last conversation that I ever have with Olive. And I think the lesson that I've kind of taken away from that experience in my life is that it doesn't matter what we talked about. It doesn't matter what I was wearing. It doesn't matter what nightie she was in. It doesn't matter if she had her teeth in or not. What matters is what stuck with me about her was how it made me feel when I was with her. I was 14 and I'm going to cry thinking about it. Yeah. When I was 14 and, having these really profound conversations with this 90-something-year-old, the dynamic of intergenerational communication is so powerful. I'm an elder millennial now, and I feel like I have experienced so many things in my personal life, but also so many things in my professional life that I have a lot of wisdom. And so it's so cheesy, and I'm still, wrapping my head about this, but yeah. So Olive, the olive branch, an extension of peace, an extension of friendship. It's not what you say. It's not, people aren't going to remember you for exactly the words that you say, but they're going to remember you for how you make them feel. And I think that's a really important concept to tie into mentorship, because mentorship is not coaching, okay? Coaching is very structured, and they've got a plan for you, and if you follow my 90-day plan and you do these things, that's coaching. But for me, mentorship is a combination of both personal and professional, and having an invested interest in the overall well-being and emotional well-being and mental health well-being for the people or the person or whatever that you're mentoring. And, I've been very fortunate to have mentors later in my life, in addition to Olive and some incredible teachers in public school and in high school and in middle school, into my professional life once I started working in Toronto, where I've met some really incredible, brilliant, inspiring women who've uplifted me and, really in a lot of ways helped my career jump off the diving board the way that it did when I moved to Toronto. And I'll talk about all of that too, but Olive Branch Mentorship is an extension of friendship, and it's an extension of peace in the workforce. It's an extension across generations. It's figuring out how we're going to be effectively integrating the younger generations into our system so that we can have capable and confident and resilient leaders who have emotional intelligence in addition to the ability to make decisions, right? For the betterment of humanity, not just for the sake of the budget. I don't know. I don't know if this is speaking to you. If it is, this is only the beginning. And the All of You podcast, as play on words as it is, like this podcast was created for all of you. ALLOVYOU. But something that my dad actually did when we were young was, if we were sitting across the room from each other or whatever, he would mouth olive juice, olive juice, or elephant shoe. But if you mouth that olive juice or you mouth elephant shoe, it looks like you're saying I love you. And the idea of the All of You podcast, all of you. All of you, and this is for all of you. And you're going to see over the course of these episodes that we're extending the olive branch to some really incredible people, and people who are stepping outside of their comfort zones and sitting on a mic and on a podcast set. Like, a lot of the people that I've sat down with have never done anything like this before, just like me. This is the first time I've ever recorded a solo podcast in my life. I've been on podcasts before, but with hosts. And I've been hosting, but I haven't ever sat. I don't even know how long I've been talking for. This is probably way too long. But anyways, this is the podcast where we sit down with all of you. And today I extended the olive branch to myself. And I cannot wait for you to hear the conversations and see the conversations and hopefully be inspired by some of the things that we're bringing to the table. And there's been a really heavy emphasis on mental health in the workplace. This is something that I've struggled with my entire life. Like, in addition to being neurodivergent, I also have a anxiety disorder and clinical depression and complex post-traumatic stress and an adjustment disorder. And so in addition to all of the trauma that I have endured and a series of really tragic losses in the last 5 or 7 years of my life, my mental health at times is not great. And I have been really struggling with circumstances that have come up in the workplace where you can, I was just going to say you can call in sick when you're sick, but you can't even call in sick when you're sick. But you definitely can't even call in sick if your mental health is sick. So I'm going to talk about that, and we have been talking about that, and I don't know. I'm just really excited about the episodes that you're going to see and hear. And like, full disclaimer, there are some really vulnerable conversations that we're having, and this is unfiltered. There's no teleprompter here. And so some of the things you hear, they're require trigger warnings. And I'll record some trigger warnings as soon as I'm done here, but it's like, if we don't talk about these things, if people don't know just how frequent these types of things occur and sort of how mental health in society has shifted, like a conversation we had a couple weeks ago, like things that I've been observing in the hospital too, like I still work in the hospital, just humanity is changing, and the challenges and the struggles that we are facing are becoming more and more severe. And, you know, we can pretend like everything that's happening is the highlight reel, but you know just as well as I do that the highlight reel is so far from what actually is happening in your life. And we just have to do this. This has to be done. The All of You podcast was meant to be because I need to sit down with all of you, and we as a collective need to work towards a better future. And even if it's just talking about it and dreaming about it, maybe somebody somewhere out there will hear us and believe in the concept of OBM and want to be a part of building a community of like-minded people who want to build a better future for the leaders in training and the Gen Alphas and whatever our world is going to look like when AI takes over, because that's inevitable, right? No, it's not going to be AI that takes over. It's going to be the people who know how to use AI who take over, and that's young people. So I believe I've rambled on for long enough, and I promised my editor that this was going to be a quick turnaround with one audio file, and we still have 3 camera angles. I'm sorry. But I hope that you take something meaningful away from this, and I'm going to get on the mic like this regularly. So throughout the introduction to this podcast, there will be episodes that are just me, and this will, be the vibe. So you can look forward to those if you're keen. And then we'll have episodes on a different set that will be co-hosted by Sham and myself, which Sham is like the hostess with the mostest. She's so good at working a room. She's so good at, I don't know. She's very good at also taming me and reining me in when I go off on, tangents. Thank you, Sham. And then there will be episodes with just me and another professional, like an executive leader. Yeah. So stick around. And I don't really know what I'm supposed to say. Like and subscribe. And we are available. We are going to be available, or hopefully we are available on everywhere where you can listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. So you can follow Olive Branch Mentorship on LinkedIn, Olive Branch Mentorship on Instagram, Olive Branch Mentorship on Facebook, and on the Olive Branch Mentorship YouTube page, we're going to have playlists for the podcast. So the All of You podcast, as we're building it, it'll be housed under Olive Branch Mentorship Incorporated, because we have the Olive Branch Network, where we're going to be having all kinds of video content. And, the Olive Branch community, which is more so what we're going to be doing with the mental health programming. And we've got bachelors of social work students from TMU University on board. So we're facilitating practicum placements. We're building an incredible thing, and I can't do this alone. And so if any of this resonates with you, follow, subscribe, comment, share, ring the little bell or whatever notification you're supposed to do. I'll work on this, I promise. I'll get a better, whatever this is, exit. Anyways, I appreciate all of you. And this is the All of You podcast. And until next time, I'm your host, Shannon. Bye for now.